This video will help you understand how to evaluate websites when trying to decide the source quality of those. So first things first, let's sort of review some of the things to think about when you're talking about source quality. And this works for any kind of source. But before we go to websites, let's look at some of the things to remember. So certain things to think about: authority, thinking about who wrote it, what's their expertise, how do we know who they are. Currency, when was it written, how long ago is the information they're quoting? So thinking about that sort of pieces. How did they get their sources, or where did they get their data? Did they collect it themselves? Are they using somebody else's information? Do they tell you where that's from? What's the purpose of the source? Is this trying to sell you something? Are they trying to convince you of something? What's their goal? Point of view. So in the past, we've talked about things like bias, and point of view is a different way to look at that. So looking at the perspective of either the organization or the author, and then more importantly, does that actually affect their argument? Because everyone has a point of view, but whether or not it affects their argument or the way they're using information is what's important to look at. Next thing is funding or transparency. Do they tell you who funded the research or who's funding this website or organization? And does that impact their findings? Does that make a difference? And then the last two down here are balance. So does the author provide multiple points of view? Do they actually talk about the counter arguments? And then the organization. So sometimes the website is published by an organization, or the organization is the author of that information. You might not see an individual. So thinking about who is it that published the source, what's the goal of that organization, and do they tell you about who they are, etc. So again, this is one of the things I really want to hit and look at, is remembering that it's not a checklist. Like, this is not one of those yes or no check boxes for sources. You really just need to kind of consider all of these ideas, or some of these ideas that you can figure out, and then determine whether or not your answers to those questions lean toward lean toward it being a quality source, or are they more leaning toward not using it. So all right, so that's kind of our review of things that we're looking for. So let's look at our first website. So our first website, I'm searching for information about social media use and college students. And so this is one of the websites on Google that is on my first page of results. So first things first, I'm going to look at dates, because that's always like the easiest thing to find first. So this one says the reports from March of 2018, which, that's been a year and a half or so by now. But if you scroll down a little bit further, or skim down a little bit further, they do say in this top paragraph that if I want to look at the 2019 survey data, it links directly to that. And I always really like when a website is able to recognize that the information there is still useful, but maybe the newer stuff would be more useful for something. So that's kind of a nice thing. So after date, I usually try to figure out organization, or who's publishing this. Okay, websites like this are often going to put something at the very top of the screen, or in the top left corner. So in this case, the Pew Research Center seems to be the information, or the group of people that are publishing this. So no, I know a little bit about Pew Research Center, but you might not. So the best way to figure out about an organization, if you're not sure who they are, and again, don't always take the name at face value. Names are really easy to be pretty generic. So paying attention to what do they actually do and who are they actually is important. An about us section is usually helpful. So about us, or more about us, or something like that. Usually the about is either at the top of a page, like it is in this case, or sometimes it'll be at the very bottom of a website. There'll be something down here in the about us. So in here, it happens to be in both places, which I think is really interesting. So down here it says about Pew Research Center. It's a nonpartisan. So nonpartisan means they don't take political sides. Fact tanked, that informs the public about issues, attitudes, and trends shaping the world. It conducts public opinion polling, demographic research, all of this, and empirical social science. It does not take policy positions. So basically, they don't say here's the kind of laws that we should make. So it's a kind of a political organization that's gathering this data, but they don't take sides, and they don't talk about policy positions, which I think is kind of interesting. If you click this about, I think it's going to take us to more information about that. And this is a website that, again, really gets in depth. So they tell you about their mission, right? Their nonprofit, nonpartisan, non-advocacy. We value independence, objectivity, humility, transparency, and innovation. That's really kind of an interesting way to talk about that. They also get really into their methods and how they do their research, which I think is always really helpful. So this About Us section is really helping us answer the like, who are they? What do they do? What is their goal? Who funds them? So here is a subsidiary of a trust. They partner with institutional funders who share a commitment to impartial research. Again, they're really big on this idea that it's data and research that is without taking a side, which I think is really kind of an interesting thing. So lots of information here about that. So I'm starting to feel pretty confident about the organization. I know who they are. They're really transparent about how they get their data, where they're getting it from. The authors are another great place to start. Like, again, a pretty easy place to look at. So by clicking on these authors, I get a little biography, who they are. I really like up here that they talk about what their expertise area is, because it looks like all of these things across the top are what they research. So this guy is an expert in internet and technology, which is something that feels like would be relevant to this topic. And down here it talks about where their degrees are from and what it is. So their degrees in public policy, and has also testified before Congress as an expert about the technology research. So this guy seems to know what he's doing. And then let's see if we can click on this author here. She, is a senior researcher. Her recent work has talked about digital divide, activism in the age of social media, master's degree in media studies, or her work focused on intersection of race, politics, and media. So again, this is sort of their wheelhouse, their research area. I like that I know the data is from 2018. It looks like they are the ones that did this survey, and it also looks like it's one that they've done before and again. They are pretty clear about where they're getting their data and what they've done. I like that they break it out, and I get the raw data, I get the charts as well as it in words. That's kind of interesting. I do have an appendix. That's interesting. Ooh, okay, so the charts and graphs are here. Math and stats, not really my thing, but it's good to know that that information is there. It's nice to see that. So it seems pretty clear where this stuff is from. I'm going to click to page 3 because I've looked through this website before. This is also what I really like about this. So this website actually tells me the methodology, how many people they sampled. So I know that they interviewed 2,000 people. 1,500 of them were actually interviewed. So the sample was 2,000, interviewed 1,500. That's a pretty big population size for a survey like this. Again, I really like that they sort of break this down and show me what this looks like, because that really helps me understand where they got their data, and so I'm more likely to sort of trust that. So looking back at this evaluation criteria, we were able to answer questions about authority, who they were, we know how current this stuff is, they told us where they got their stuff, their purpose and their goal, their funding, their point of view. Like these 6, they really hit pretty hard. Balance, I think, really comes back into this point of view for them, which I think is really important. And the organization, there's a lot of information there. So to me, this feels like I feel pretty confident in asking and answering these questions, saying, I know where they got their stuff from. I understand what their purpose is. They're very clear about their point of view. I know that this information is really current, and I could actually look at the 2019 data if I really wanted to. I feel pretty confident about this website. Okay, so we're going to look at another website, and this one is also, when I searched for social media and college students, was also on that first page of results for me. So this is about social networking, again, statistics, which I'm always really interested in. So again, we're going to kind of walk through it the same way we did this time. So I am looking for dates first, and I don't see a date up top. So this is where I start to kind of skim and scroll. Okay, so it says here, this organization teamed up with their sister company in the fall of 2013. So again, this data is a little bit older. And while I'm here, I also see that they surveyed 260 college students, which feels like a much smaller sample size than the 1,500 that we saw before. So, okay, so I'm already seeing that. I'm seeing some stats and graphs, which I always love. But that's kind of all I'm seeing here when I scroll down. Like, I love statistics and I love those percentages, but like, I am not seeing a whole lot of kind of explanation of that. Um, and also, this is 2013, and I know that like my social media use has desperately changed and very drastically changed since 2013. So I'm kind of interested to see a little bit more about maybe like why and what's going on and who they are. So again, we're going to come back up here. So organizations, right? Clicking on and seeing like, I don't know anything about this media organization, so I'm going to try to find an about, which I don't want free samples. Okay, so ads, that's always an interesting thing. Like that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I am always a little interested when I get the pop-ups, right? Okay, so about us, I'm going to click on that, or the about, I guess is what this one is called. Okay, so when I get to the about on this website, first thing I see what they specialize in. So what I'm seeing here is they're doing, it looks like they have printing services. So that might be what their primary goal is, their purpose. I'm getting a lot of like phone numbers, unlimited support. It feels a little bit like we're maybe selling me something, selling me these print services. But again, maybe that information is still pretty valid. So again, just thinking about the purpose, they're trying to sell me stuff. So this time we see this printing history goes back to 1984. So this has been around a while. Guy was a student at UT Austin. That was his publishing. In 88, he realized the need for a monthly entertainment publication for students. Okay, so that's what this seems to be. And that, where's that? Is that Study Breaks magazine? That was the one they did the survey with. Staff grew, began to design solutions, purchasing a web press, full service printing company. Okay, so that's interesting. Like this is kind of what we get about the story. I'm a little more concerned about the fact that I don't know a lot about it. Okay, so we see their core values. Again, interesting that we're putting it that way. Live better through print, high quality print products. So I'm a little concerned that a lot of the mission statement here seems to be about the printing stuff, but not about like their research. And especially since that research doesn't seem to be about print. So interesting. All right, let's see if we can go back and see if we can find some more information about what's going on. Let's look at this other one, the one that they did the study with. All right, so taking a while to get there. And once we look at this one again, this always feels a little bit concerning when the domains are no longer here. So the website that the company goes to didn't update their domain name. So again, this is not an automatic no. None of these really are. But again, this is starting to feel a little bit like, I'm a little bit questioning what's going on. I can't get to this guy's name. I wonder what this online link goes to. Okay, so this looks like it's a blog or articles, but again, I can't click on the people, so I don't know who they are. So again, looking at what we found here, looking at that kind of pieces, if we go back to the evaluation criteria, the authority, I don't know who the author is because I can't really get back to that information. This one is not quite as current, right? The sources of data, they do tell us that they gathered that information, but their sample size is pretty small. The purpose of this website seems to be about selling me printing stuff. I don't know, I'm not sure I understand how that impacts their point of view. I'm not really sure why they're doing this survey. And again, I don't know who's funding the research. It does look like they're a for-profit company, so I think the funding probably comes from them selling stuff. I wish I could get back to that website about the organization they worked with. So I feel like I don't necessarily, there's not as many like things that saying, no, I shouldn't use this, but I just don't feel as confident that I can actually answer these questions digging through this information. So I am probably in this case leaning a little bit more towards, I'm not sure I'm going to use this just because I can't answer a lot of these questions about this website. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to start looking for things, looking for an about, looking for the authors, looking for dates, looking to see what the purpose of this is. And I think purpose and point of view is something that we maybe don't always hit on websites that maybe we should. Like, what's their goal? Who is this organization? Because I will be completely honest, that website with the stats and graphs, like, I love me a good graphic like this. Like, these are really interesting to me. But if I don't know where they're getting this information from and I don't know why they're trying to tell me this information, I'm a little bit more hesitant to use that information, especially when I know from like this website, I know where they're getting it and the data isn't as pretty, but I can tell you a little bit more about like what their goal is. And this is a little bit more to inform and educate rather than to persuade me to do something. So hopefully that's giving you a way to start thinking about how to do website evaluation.